Welcome into another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wasserman here with my top 10 returning defensive tackles in college football entering the 2025 season. And Dalton, we're done with all the offensive rankings now on this channel. Now we're going over to the defensive side of the ball, and once again, it's a very good defensive line grouping that we have in college football.
It is for sure, and staying in the trenches, obviously, like we did earlier in the week with the offensive line. This is really where teams separate themselves when it comes to winning and losing ball games, right? Why the SEC and the Big Ten and some of these bigger, more well-known teams and the higher-ranked teams are so special because they have these types of players in the trenches that get it done both in the pass game and the run game.
Absolutely, yeah. We lost a lot of great defensive tackles to the NFL this past year. Obviously, Mason Graham was a top 5 pick to the Cleveland Browns from Michigan. His teammate Keenan Grant is gone as well. Walter Nolan was a first-rounder as well. So we're losing a lot of great defensive tackles from college football, but still have a lot of really talented ones coming back for another year. I want to remind you guys that these lists I make were obviously made off of watching the players, but also a lot of it has to do with the PFF stats that we have that are also available to you guys with a PFF Plus subscription. So go to subscribe.pff.com today to get access to all of those stats. You can make your own top 10 returning defensive tackles and tell me how stupid my list was in the comments below as well. And of course, you get access to our beautiful 2026 NFL mock draft simulator where you could draft some of these defensive tackles for your favorite team using that mock draft simulator as well. All right, Dawn. My honorable mention defensive tackle is actually a guy that a lot of people probably expect to be in the top 10 because he is a guy who's getting a lot of buzz right now for the 2026 NFL draft. That is Caleb Banks from Florida. He's 6'5". He's got long arms as well. So he's got really good length and size for the position. And he's been a really productive pass rusher during his 2 years with the Gators after transferring in from Louisville. He has 53 pressures over the last 2 years. That leads all returning power forward defensive tackles. 12.7% pressure rate is second among returning defensive tackles in the country. Getting a little bit better as a run defender, has never earned a 70 run defense grade yet in his career so far. But he's got great length and great pass rush ability. So even though he's an honorable mention for me, Dawn, I completely understand why a lot of people are high on him for the 2026 NFL draft.
Well, he's certainly ideally built, and he shows a lot of flashes, and I think we really started to see it as a pass rusher at the end of the year. Last year, 17 pressures over his last 3 games, and didn't even get to play most of the Florida State game with an injury, a foot injury that caused him to miss the end of the season. So I think when you look at the highlights, you look at the upside of Caleb Banks, it could be a really fun year on Florida's defensive line. He's one of the big reasons for it. We'll have another player in our edge defender rankings that's going to be prominent in those conversations too. But no, Banks' high-end tape is really, really good. He's just got to find that consistency throughout a whole season. Last year, a 73 overall grade, obviously solid, but there's a chance as a pass rusher, this is a guy who makes a big breakout this year.
Absolutely. All right, honorable mention is Caleb Banks from Florida. At number 10 is Grayson Halton from Oklahoma. Doesn't really have the ideal size like maybe a Caleb Banks has. He's only 6'2", 291 pounds, but he compensates for that with elite quickness for the position. He has an 84.2 pass rush grade on true pass rush snaps over the last 2 years, the highest mark of any of my top 10 defensive tackles in the country. 13.6% pressure rate over the last 2 years leads all returning defensive tackles in college football, and a 12.5% pass rush win rate over the last 2 years is the best among returning Power 4 defensive tackles as well. So another guy, Grayson Halton, who I think is kind of going a little under the radar right now on that Oklahoma defensive line, but his pass rush production, Dolan, over the last couple of years really deserves a spot on this list.
No, for sure. I think that's what you're looking at is a smaller player, one of those twitchier 3 techniques that Brent Venables can move all over the defensive line, and he can succeed in one-on-one pass rush matchups. So he's another one. I think what we have, and it's going to be kind of a theme with this list, is guys who have shown us some flashes as pass rushers. A lot of the elite pass rushers inside went into the NFL draft, but if you're looking for, just like we just talked about with Caleb Banks, another breakout pass rusher in the interior, Grayson Halton could be that guy. We know Oklahoma's going to be well equipped to win on defense. We have more questions on the offensive side, but Halton's going to be a reason on the inside that SEC quarterbacks are so bothered this year.
Absolutely, yeah. Oklahoma should have a really good defensive line next year once again, and Grayson Halton is a major reason why. So checks in at number 10 on my list. Number 9 is Rashawn Benny from Michigan. Yes, another Michigan Wolverine is a really good defensive tackle because obviously Keenan Grant, Mason Graham were top 15 picks in this past NFL draft, but Michigan's still in a great spot at D tackle with Rashawn Benny coming back for another year 84.4 PFF grade this past year for Rashawn Benny, tied for 11th among all defensive tackles in college football. 87.5 run defense grade was also in the top 15 as well. 6'4", 296 pounds with really good agility. He has quick hands. He can be a really key part of Michigan's defensive line next year, and I think Rashawn Benny could be one of the breakout stars in college football.
No, I absolutely agree with this. You know, when I was watching him again, he reminded me a lot of his former teammate, Chris Jenkins, actually, when you talk about the way that he can move around the defensive line, stack and shed, the way he extends his arms and stacks and sheds offensive linemen off him, especially in the run game. 87.5 run defense grade this past year. I know he was kind of the third fiddle behind Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and staying fresh, but I think this is someone who's going to be an extremely key piece to Michigan's defense. He's a great run defender, and you mentioned it, the hand usage, the quick, twitchy hands, that's something that gives you even higher upside as a pass rusher. He could really break out as a pass rusher. Hasn't quite done it yet fully on a consistent basis, but the floor as a run defender here is fantastic, and you know those Michigan defensive linemen are well taught. He's got enough experience. Now he's getting into a real starting role with Graham and Grant gone. I think Benny's going to be a lot of fun to watch this year.
I know the run defense is outstanding, but there's a rep on. I think I sent you last night of him against Minnesota, where he completely broke the ankles of a Minnesota offensive lineman. Did not even get a hand on him, and then he sacked the quarterback as well. Just that kind of agility and that kind of hand usage is rare, and that's why I think there's even more upside for him as a pass rusher.
I think at the very least, he's a very similar player, like I mentioned earlier, to Chris Jenkins, and he may have more pass rush potential. If he hits more of that pass rush potential, he could get drafted even significantly higher than Jenkins did 2 years ago.
Absolutely, yeah. Rashawn Benny, really good run defender, though. Checks in at number 9 on this list. Another outstanding run defender. Checks in at number 8. That is the Godfather, Dante Corleone from Cincinnati. He obviously had a lot of setbacks this past year. Last June, he had blood clots in his lungs, which really couldn't resume football activities for him from June until week 2 of the season, so never really had an offseason. Dante Corleone did, so obviously a little bit of a slower year for him this past year, and why he had a career low 73.3 PFF grade this past year. But it is 2 years before that, though, he was an absolutely dominant player. 92.7 PFF grade across 2022 and 2023, the highest of any defensive tackle in the country, and a 93.1 run defense grade was also the best of any tackle in the country as well. He has great pad level at 6'1". He has really good power and explosiveness as well. Now that he's fully healthy this offseason, he could have a really good 5th and final year with the Bearcats.
Yeah, I would expect a bounce back, and I think first and foremost, you mentioned it with the blood clots, and there was a time where he wasn't really sure he was going to play football again. Oh, just glad to see him on the field last year at all, right? And even for as much as he did, and he didn't get into week 2 and still set a career high for snaps played, considering all that adversity and not being able to work out in the offseason, not practicing really up until the season started. So when you consider still in a hyper-competitive Big 12 with a new defensive coordinator in Cincinnati, mind you, still to grade a 73.3 overall and be as good in run defense as he always is. Really impressive stuff from Corleone. Definitely deserves to be in the top 10 of this list, and I would expect a bounce-back year, and we're going to be talking about him in next year's draft because he is one of the best nose guards in the country.
Absolutely, yeah. A guy I actually interviewed a couple years ago, actually. Really good interview, and I'm glad to see Dante Corleone, the Godfather, best nickname in college football, is fully healthy now and giving us one more year at Cincinnati before he moves on to the NFL draft. All right, number 7 is another Big 12 defensive tackle. That is Dominique Orange from Iowa State, who's not the only player from Iowa, the state of Iowa, that we're going to talk about today. But Dominique Orange, really good player. He has the size to anchor as a nose tackle at 320 pounds, but he moves really well at 320 pounds as well, with a lethal spin move as well from Dominique Orange. 13.6% pass rush run rate is 10th among all D tackles in the country this past season. 80.4 run defense grade over the last 2 years is among the top 20 for power forward defensive tackle. So once again, Dominique Orange kind of looks like a nose tackle with 320 pounds, but he does not move like a nose tackle.
No, he doesn't move like a nose tackle, but the interesting part to me is that his 5 highest graded games last year came in the final 5 games when Iowa State finally just committed to him playing nose tackle, because in that 3-man front where things are a little funky, you need those bigger defensive linemen, because a lot of times they're sending three-man rushes more than any team in the country. It's harder to stop the run when you've only got those three-down linemen unless you're really, really big up front. But this is somebody who the last 5 games I really think showed truly who he is. And even as a pass rusher, this guy, look, when centers are trying to block him as a pass rusher, it's just not happening. You mentioned the moves, the quickness, the spin move. He's a really underrated player. I think Iowa State should just commit to him playing over the center the entire season and in the A-gaps, because there's times where you even saw him as big as he is off the edge and winning there. Not that he can't do it, but I think his ideal spot is over the nose. You saw it the last 5 games of last year. He's one of the best defensive tackles in the country. Deserves fully to be in this spot. I think he's an excellent football player. That's just what I would do, is just leave him in the A-gaps, let him win in there, find somebody else who can play off the edge. Maybe mess around once in a while, but instead of doing it so 50-50 like they were earlier in the year, leave him at the nose and let him clog that space.
Yep, Dominique Orange checks in at number 7 on this list I mentioned before. Not the only player from the Hawkeye State here on this top 10, because at number 6 is a Hawkeye in Aaron Graves from Iowa, dominant pass rusher over his sophomore and junior years for Iowa. 12 sacks over the last 2 seasons, leads all returning defensive tackles in college football. 82.3 pass rush grade over the last 2 years as well, is the best among returning power 4 D tackles as well. His hand usage, man, is among the best in college football, and it kind of makes sense considering back in high school, he was a dominant wrestler in the state of Iowa as well. If he can kind of improve his strength in the run game a little bit, he has the potential to go even higher, maybe even the top 5 of this list. But as a pass rusher with that hand usage, Dalton, he's one of the best in America.
Yeah, one of the best interior pass rushers in the country. And you mentioned it, that hand usage, that hand-to-hand combat that he uses on the inside and getting off on his first step. That's really what makes him a special football player. And he still has that grittiness of any of those defensive linemen from Iowa, right? They obviously have a certain type of, he's got to get a little more consistent play on the run, but you can see when he uses his hands, and he does it quite often, when he wins those battles, he's disruptive. And as a pass rusher, I'd expect another step here. If we were making a list of, okay, who are the guys that by the end of the year we could call the best interior pass rusher in the country, Aaron Graves has to be on that list, right? When you talk about 12 sacks, 43 pressures over the last 2 years from the inside, and that's only going to get better as he gets just a little bit more explosive. I think the foot speed is not elite necessarily, but if he can catch up with the quickness a little bit better first step to go along with that hand usage, he could have another big season as a pass rusher.
Definitely. You got to get a little bit better as a run defender, like I said before, but as a pass rusher, it is hard to find many better than Aaron Graves over the last couple of years at least. At number 5 is a transfer, Lee Hunter, transferring to Texas Tech from UCF, the only transfer that we have in this top 10 list. He's staying in the Big 12, though, going to Texas Tech. Over the last 2 years, he leads all defensive tackles in the country with 58 run defense stops. You see on the screen right there. Also has 27 tackles for loss or no gain. Again, the most among any defensive tackle in the country over the last 2 years. And 49 pressures over the last 2 years is second among returning power 4 D tackles as well. So a dominant run defender and still a really good pass rusher as well for UCF over the last 2 years. 6'4", 320 pounds. He has raw power with impressive movement skills of that size as well. He's a disruptive force in the pass and run game. And Dalton, we mentioned it time and time again now, Texas Tech has a loaded transfer portal class coming in next year, especially on the defensive line especially. Lee Hunter is a major reason why he's one of the 5 best D tackles in the country, in my opinion.
There's certain guys I hear you talk enough about that I go, okay, I could just make the list of Max as my guys. Lee Hunter is definitely in that group. And honestly, he's obviously a little bit shorter. He's 6'4" instead of 6'7". But when I was watching him, you see a little bit of Deion Walker in there, kind of that similar, a little bit of a high-cut build, but he's got more finesse than you would think for 6'4" and 320. You mentioned it, a really disruptive run defender. I think he could get even better there with a better supporting cast around him, because he was clearly the best player on UCF's defense the last 2 years. Now, I think that's a part you think about with Hunter, is going to get a lot more one-on-one matchups on a loaded defensive line for Texas Tech, full of transfers. All 4 of their starters going to be transfers. Is that right? So, I think the sky is the limit now for Hunter and this Texas Tech defensive line, but he's a disruptive force as a run defender. He's got a lot of finesse as a pass rusher that you'll like to see out of him. Just, again, reminded me just a little bit of Deion Walker Walker. Not quite built as freakishly, but the style of play is pretty similar.
I know we're ranking only individual players right now, but soon we'll be ranking my units in college football, defensive line being one of them. Don, spoiler right now, Texas Tech is one of my 5 best D-lines in the country.
It's hard to blame you. Hunter, Romello Height, David Bailey, right? Skylar Gill-Howard, who didn't quite make this list, but I'm sure he was pretty close. I mean, you've got some darn good football players on that D-line. As long as they get the secondary and maybe the quarterback situation figured. I know they know who their quarterback is, but need a little more consistency. That's a team. There's a reason. I think they have the second best odds to win the Big 12 right now. They have a boatload of talent. This defensive line, for me, is where it starts.
It is loaded on the defensive line. Like Dalton said, all 4 starters are going to be transfers, and all 4 of those transfers really, really good players at their previous schools as well. And Lee Hunter is probably the best one of all of them, honestly, checking in at number 5 on this list. At number 4 is from Georgia, Kristen Miller, the redshirt sophomore last year with the Bulldogs. 82.3 PFF grade, 82.2, last year, among the 15 best in the Power 4. 83.9 run defense grade as well, was also in the top 15, and his 11.2% pass rush win rate was in the top 20 as well. Good length, good power to hold his own against the run, and also has the quickness to slip past offensive linemen as a pass rusher as well. So I think Kristen Miller is going to be a breakout star for Georgia on their defensive line.
I think he's going to have to be, because I think the interesting thing when I was looking at Georgia in this defensive line situation, headed by Kristen Miller, is that they had 6 defensive linemen last year play at least 400 snaps. All 6 of those guys are gone. Miller's up next with 385, and then no one else played more than 200. So I think when you look at Miller and the importance of Georgia's run defense, which I would argue is still the best part of their team last year, all those guys up front are gone except for Miller. So now when you talk about in the interior, him having to set the tone and really be that dominant force, obviously C.J. Allen back there at linebacker too, and they've always got good players in the secondary, but I think Georgia's run defense is going to be something to watch because it's going to be centered around Miller and a lot of young guys who didn't play a lot last year. So not only is he really good, he's an excellent run defender, he's a space eater, all of those things, but he's going to be extremely important to their success because they're trying to rebuild this defensive line after losing a lot of pieces to the NFL draft.
And obviously they have a ton of former 5-star recruits in that defensive line still. But you're right, Kristen Miller's the only guy who really played a lot of snaps for them last year, and they have a transfer from Army and Elo Mendoza. You can probably start at one of the edge defender spots, and everyone else kind of played around 200-ish snaps for Georgia last year. So again, a lot of talent on the defensive line, just not a lot of proven stars yet. Kristen Miller is the one proven star I would say Georgia has in the defensive line. He checks in at number 4 on my list right here. At number 3 is another SEC defensive tackle, this time Tim Keenan III, from Alabama. 6'2", 326 pounds. He is a force in the trenches. He consistently eats up double teams and excels as a run defender. You see right there, an 89.8 run defense grade, was 3rd among all defensive tackles in the Power 4, and the only 2 who had a better run defense grade last year than Tim Keenan III in the Power 4. Mason Graham, Walter Nolan. Both of them were top 20 picks in the 2025 NFL draft. So Tim Keenan III is on that kind of level as a run defender. He was one of the 15 most valuable defensive tackles in the country this past year, according to our wins above average metric. Now, he's not the best pass rusher. He's more of a true kind of nose tackle for Alabama. He kind of eats up space in the run game, but he is a dominant run defender. I would argue, Don, he is the best run defender we have at D-tackle right now.
You could certainly argue it. There's a guy ahead of him on this list that I would also make the argument for that we'll get to. But no, Keenan is the type of player that I'm so glad that PFF grades exist for, right? Because you look at it on the surface, okay, 14 pressures, he had 3 sacks last year. He's just some big guy in the middle. That's not just some big guy. That's a brick wall in between the tackles for Alabama, opening things up for everybody else. I talk about this a lot with these types of defensive tackles, Max. It's that they make everybody else in the front 7 better. When you talk about Deontay Lawson and the linebackers, freeing them up on the second level, taking away double teams from guys like LT Overton on the defensive line. This is someone who just does not move backwards in the run game. He is one of the best pure run defenders in college football, and it's going to be very hard again to run between the tackles on Alabama with Tim Keenan in the middle of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, he is just a dominant run defender. Like Don said, why our grades exist is to show that even though the raw pressure and sack numbers aren't the best for him, he is so good in the run game, just eating up space in the run game, that he deserves a spot very high up on this list. And now he's at number 3 for my top 10 D tackles in the country entering next year. At number 2 is Zane Durant from Penn State. He was a constant presence in the backfield last year for the Nittany Lions. He was a great pass rusher and a great run defender. In fact, last year, He led all defensive tackles in the country with 14 tackles for loss or no gain. Also had 28 pressures that were among the top 25 in college football as well. Little undersized, not as big as some other guys on this list. He's only 6'1", 288 pounds, but he has impressive power at that size and obviously very good quickness to shoot gaps as well. He's, like I said before, he's a disruptive force for that Nittany Lions defense. And Dalton, a Penn State defensive line that lost a lot from last year. Obviously, Abdul Carter is gone as well, but you still have denied Dennis Sutton. You still have Zane Durant. Those two are going to spearhead, which should still be a really good defensive line for Penn State.
Absolutely, the type of player that Jim Knowles, I would say he didn't even have at Ohio State last year. He had more of those bigger run-stopping defensive tackles at Ohio State. I'm curious to see how he uses them and how much he centers maybe even just that four-man rush around him. He can play the three technique, a little bit smaller, 6'1", 288, but he's got elite quickness, big-time twitch, big-time get-off. So you're talking about a little bit different player than the last couple like Tim Keenan or Kristen Miller, but a disruptive force, a penetrator, like you mentioned, a guy who makes plays consistently in the backfield. With Abdul Carter gone, Penn State's looking for somebody else to step up, and it's very likely that Durant's going to be that guy on the inside.
Do you make the comparison to Kalijah Kancey? You said you saw a little
Yeah,
bit,
I don't know if he's that small, but it's that style, right?
Yeah.
It seems like we get now more and more of these contrasts between these D tackles where they're either 6'5" and 330 and they're these big brick walls like Kenneth Grant, or you've got guys like this now, and it seems like they're getting smaller and smaller every year, 6'1", 285, 290, but elite athleticism, elite quickness, just a different style. So I think Jim Knowles is going to have a lot of fun with Durant up there in Happy Valley.
Well, one guy who is pretty big and also still really athletic is my number one player on this list, and honestly, Dalton, this is another one where I was like, yep, he's number one. I didn't have to really look it up that much. Peter Woods from Clemson is my number one D tackle. Really pretty obvious number one, at least in my opinion, as well. In fact, he played this past year out of position for most of the year as an edge defender for Clemson, and yet he still had an 83.3 grade for the Tigers this past year over his first 2 years of college football, meaning 2023 and 2024. He is both the highest graded and the most valuable returning power forward defensive tackle according to our wins above average metric. He leads all power forward D tackles over the last 2 years with an 89.7 run defense grade and a 14.9% pass rush win rate. So again, he's maybe the best pass rusher at D tackle that we have in college football right now, and probably the best run defender that we have at D tackle in college football right now as well. Power and agility at 6'3", 315 pounds. He is a matchup nightmare for any offensive lineman in college football, meaning guards, centers, and we saw even this past year at edge defender, even tackles had a hard time defending Peter Woods as well. This guy, I think, is going to be at least a top 5, top 10 pick in this upcoming draft. He is pretty easily, in my opinion, the number one D tackle in the country.
Yeah, I don't think this was one of your easier decisions on this list, and the first of many Clemson Tigers we're going to talk about in this episode and the coming ones on this defense, because it might be the best defense in the country. But Woods on the inside is such a big reason why. When you talk about last year, Clemson's run defense, a little bit more of a struggle to defend off the edge, but in between the tackles, yeah, you're not getting by Peter Woods. And it's something you mentioned the power. His true freshman year, last year as a true sophomore, you talking about a guy who I think he's just ridiculously strong beyond his years. It just feels like he's stronger than all the seniors out there, and he was only a true freshman and true sophomore his first 2 seasons playing, and he got better to me as a pass rusher last year as well. I think there is even more to come on that front. I think this is clearly the best defensive tackle in the country, arguably the best run defender in the country across any defensive line, and you just look at the consistency he plays with. It just doesn't feel like he never has a bad week, right? Maybe he's sometimes a little quieter as a pass rusher, but what the impact that he brings on the inside and run defense for this team is so big. Nobody in the ACC is going to be able to run between the tackles on Clemson because number 11 is in there, and he is plugging every gap you can think of, can move all across the defensive line. Just a special football player that I think is going to continue to get better this season.
And the fact that Clemson felt comfortable enough to play him at edge defender last year at 315 pounds, like that'll be easily the biggest edge rusher in the NFL at 315. He should not be playing edge rusher, and Clemson kind of learned their lesson in the second half of the year, moving him back to D tackle. But he's still, like I said, Dawn, still at an 80-plus PFF grade while playing mostly edge rusher, playing out of position last year. Just shows how freaky of a player Peter Woods is. And do you agree he's probably going to be like a top 10 at least pick in next year's draft?
Yeah, most likely. I think there's going to be some teams that maybe want to see a little more pass rush production, but when you dig in on the underneath metrics, a 13.5% pass rush win rate last year, it's a very good number for an interior player. I think it was around 15 15 the year before. Those are really good numbers for interior players. I think absolutely this is someone you project to be in a top 10 pick. Clearly the best D tackle in the country, special football player for as young as he is. Honestly, with his play strength, I think he could just play. I think he could play in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
He walked in as a true freshman, and it felt like he was stronger than most juniors and seniors that he played against. He's terrific. I mean, and his skill set. It's so easy to project to the next level. You just go, he's powerful. He knows where he's going in the run game. He gets to the football. He can be versatile. He can move all around. If you wanted to put him off the edge in certain situations, you could. I wouldn't leave him there permanently. But the fact that he's even able to do that at such a young age, it says a lot about him. He's just a special player. Yeah, I think he's going to go top 10 next year.
I think Peter Woods is pretty easily the top D tackle in next year's draft, and his teammate, who we'll get to in our next video, pretty easily for me, at least right now, the top edge rusher in next year's draft as well. Clemson's defensive line is loaded. The entire defense is loaded. The entire team is loaded. Dalton, they have the number one quarterback in my rankings too, and Kate Klubnik. Tigers going to be pretty good next year. So Peter Woods checking in my number one D tackles. Kind of recap for everyone what my top 10 was. Honorable mention was Caleb Banks from Florida. Number 10 was Grayson Halton for Oklahoma. Number 9, Rashawn Benny from Michigan. Number 8, Dante Corleone, the Godfather from Cincinnati. At number 7, Dominique Orange from Iowa State. Number 6, another Iowa player, Aaron Graves from Iowa, though. Lee Hunter at number 5 from Texas Tech, transferring to Texas Tech from UCF. Number 4, Kristen Miller from Georgia. Number 3, Tim Keenan III from Alabama. Number 2, Zane Durant from Penn State. And at number 1, pretty easily, is Peter Woods from Clemson. Anything in this top 10, Dalton, you think I should change? Anyone should be higher or lower? Anyone I missed in this top 10 that should be in here as well?
No, I think it's pretty reasonable. I mean, I could see there are some guys towards the bottom that I think could certainly rise up when you look at Benny and Halton and even Caleb Banks in that honorable mention spot. By the end of the year, these are guys with a boatload of talent that could be closer to the top 3 to 5 of this list. But for now, I think you've got some proven, established players here, especially in these first 6 to 8 spots. I think guys who have done it for multiple years, and that's a big factor in it, right? Sometimes too, you get that track record. When you know what's coming, you know these guys are good football players. They're going to have really, really good 2024 seasons. So I think you could see there's some risers at the bottom that I think it depends on what you value too. If you value run defense relatively equally to pass rushing, then I think it's a fantastic list. There's some people that are going to go, hey, I want more of an interior pass rusher to be near the top of this list. You know, maybe there's some other guys that'll rise up. We'll see if Benny hits that potential. Yeah. Caleb Banks, some people think by the end of the year, Caleb Banks could be number 1 or 2 on this list, I'm sure. We just have to see it. So there's potential at the bottom. I think it's a really solid first, especially the top 8. These are all really good football players and guys that help their teams win, even though it might be in a quieter fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. So you hear from Dalton right there. It's a perfect list right there. So I think the one I'll get the most flack for, Dalton, is probably Caleb Banks, considering if you look at the 2026 consensus board right now, Caleb Banks is the number 18 overall prospect on the consensus board, so he's actually only trailing Peter Woods among D tackles on that board.
The upside is absolutely there. Yeah. There's no question about the upside, and that's why you look so often the boards, especially this early in the process, are made based on upside. It's absolutely there. It's all right there in front of Caleb Banks. Just need more consistency. That's all we're looking for. If he gives you that, and he gives you that pass rush production that he gave at the last 3 games last year, if he does that for a whole season, yeah, he would end up being number 2 or 3 on this list, absolutely.
I just want to remind people, too, this is, again, top 10 D tackles in college football right now, ranking for college football purposes. If we were ranking for the 2026 NFL Draft, Caleb Banks would absolutely be in the top 10. I think as a prospect, he's a little bit better than what he is as a player right now. But, yeah, again, this is just what we think for college football going into next year. Caleb Banks got to get a little better as a run defender. That's why he just missed out on being a top 10, but still deserves an honorable mention spot in that list as well. Next up for us is the top 10 edge defenders in college football entering the 2025 season. That comes out next week on Monday. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that right there. For Dalton Wasserman, for producer Eli back there, for Elizabeth back there as well, I'm Max Chadwick. We'll see you guys on Monday with our top 10 edge rushers in college football.